Okay, we're in the last week. We're almost done, and you might be wondering what are we going to do for the final essay, and aren't we writing on Washington Black? And yes, I'll show you how we're going to go about that. And what I've just posted were 5 different topics related to Washington Black. And I want to be clear about these is that you only have to choose one of them. You can look through all 5 of them and think about which one you want to write on. You can write on Tana or the mirroring effect that goes on, or you can write about Titch, or I'll go through the 5 in a moment, but you only have to choose one of them. And what I'll be making available, and starting on Thursday, I will make these available, is I will make 5 different questions available, and each question will deal with one of the topics. But again, I really want to emphasize you only need to choose one of the topics, and therefore you only need to answer one of the questions. Okay? So I want to make that super clear. You only need to answer one of them, and I will make these questions available on Thursday morning. But right now, those topics are available, so you can start thinking about and working on getting a good idea of what you want to deal with in the book. Okay? And this is something about it. If you choose one of the topics, say you pick the one that deals with Tana, or you pick the one that deals with Tichborne, you can go in and you start from the back, from part 4, and then you can go through and find the elements from the rest of the book that you want to deal with. You can turn this book into a big old cheat note. Notice the way I write on my pages like crazy. That's what you can do, is find what you want to deal with, and then you have your notes ready and the scenes you want to write about. Have those ready so that when you decide, hey, now I want to write my in-class essay, you can jump in there and write your essay. You've got it all ready. You do not need quotation marks, direct quotations from the text, nor do you need a works cited at the end. Okay, you don't need that. You just need to show me that you know the scenes where certain things are happening that you want to write about. Okay, so if I told you about the scene where Titch and Washington are leaving, leaving Bermuda, or the Bahamas, or Barbados, they're leaving Barbados and they're taking off and they're trying to get away, and the storm is tossing them. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You know that scene. And why is it important? It's important because it shows that Titch was really willing to make sacrifices for Washington to get him out of there. And he doesn't get any direct benefit from saving Washington. Instead, he's put himself at great risk, but he also demonstrates that he doesn't really understand what he's doing. And he crashes the aerostat into Captain Benedict's boat. So that's why I think it's important. And so that's what you need to demonstrate in each and every one of the body paragraphs, that you know the scenes you wanted to write about, but you also know the importance of those scenes. Okay, in each of the body paragraphs, you need to show you know the scenes, and you should have about 3 or 4 scenes really down, dealing with one of the topics, dealing with Tana or Titch, or dealing with mirrors, mirror representations of things, or dealing with how art is portrayed in there and how representations are represented. And I'll go through the topics in a moment, but again, I want to emphasize, make sure you get the book done, and do go through the videos that I've presented all along over the last few weeks. Really go through the themes that are going on in the novel. Okay, both the video where I go through the quotations, but also the video where she talks about how she constructed the process she went through for writing the book. Okay, so those, if you really know the book and you know those videos, you'll be in good shape. And I will be posting it Thursday morning. I will leave it available until Saturday night, but I need to give you a heads up. Do not open it until you are ready to sit down and write, because it does have a limited time that it's available. So don't open the actual questions until you are ready to sit down and write. Okay? So the topics you can prepare ahead of time. You can get them all ready, and again, write notes all over your book. Be ready to go, and write all over things. Try to do kind of like this, where you're writing on stuff, and you know what's important and why you think it's important. Okay, you know those scenes. Like if I told you it's about, the scene where Washington goes underwater and encounters an animal that he finds strange, and yet it has a black and red appearance, and it's this, and that is when Washington went underwater and when he's deep sea diving, but also that's when he first encounters the octopus and identifies with it and sees it as something magnificent. So that's why it's important. And so I see Washington seeing himself in the octopus, both physically, his appearance after the accident, seem to echo the description of the octopus when he first encounters it. It's both black and red in its appearance, but it's somehow, engaging for him. And so in a lot of ways, he is identifying with the octopus. That's me telling you why I think that scene is important. Okay? So describe the scene, then go into why you think that scene is important. Be able to do that with one of the topics. Okay? So let me take a moment right now to jump into the topics themselves. And let's see if I can shrink myself up. I'm going to pause for a minute, then I'll be right back. Okay, so what I want to do now is go through the topics. And these are the 5 topics that you'll want to prepare to get ready for, the final essay. And mind you, there's going to be 5 questions available to respond to for the final essay. And you only need one of these topics. And you can choose which one of these topics you want to look into to get you ready to write one of the essays. So there'll be 5 questions for the final essay, and you only need to choose one, and one of them will deal with one of these topics, okay? And so you can look into the mirror images, and this is something I've discussed in the videos that I've posted to the class that are available in the weeks, in the 15th and the 14th, 15th, and 16th weeks. The mirror images, the technique of using mirror images throughout the novel. Find something in part 4 where you think, oh my gosh, I've seen this before a couple of times, where something echoes throughout the novel, where scenes are essentially repeated but different. And that really seems to be a technique that S.E. Edgewon uses throughout the novel. And so find something in part 4 where it's like, oh my, he's been through this before, or something like this. And anything as simple as, his experience when he first gets to Morocco in part 4, that disconcerting experience where he doesn't really know what's going on and he's afraid. That's the type of experience he had when he first arrived in Virginia, okay? When he didn't quite know what was going on, and that seemed to mirror it. And you see that again and again and again in the story, where he's not quite sure of what's going on in one way or another. But the technique of reflecting an earlier situation is something that goes on throughout the novel, okay? Even in something as simple as when Washington Black was underwater and he's looking at that octopus and he can't quite figure it out, but it's somehow a very dark color and it's got red in it, and it looks so somehow stunning and fascinating, but repulsive. And he seems to be looking at a reflection of how his face appeared after his own injury. But he was actually looking at the octopus and the shifting color of it, and he found it absolutely captivating, and he felt for that. He felt empathy for the octopus, okay? And so that was mirroring his own experience with suffering the physical trauma of the explosion. And that's such an odd way to go about things, but that's S.E. Edgewon's, one of her techniques, is to mirror throughout the novel and replicate certain situations where she brings up certain themes of a similar type, but she does something slightly different. So look for those in part 4 that seem to reflect things from earlier. And you're going to want to find about 3 other parts of the novel that reflect some aspect of part 4. Okay, so you can spend some time finding those other 3 events or passages that seem to reflect something from part 4. And then the next one is to research and reflect on Titch and Tichborne. Now, that, by the way, those aren't misspellings. In the novel, she calls him Titch, T-I-T-C-H. But the actual historical person that she seems to be modeling Titch after was named Tichborne. No T in it, no T-I-T. It's T-I-C-H, born. And a little bit on him, a very little bit on him, because if you do this one, you'll want to look into it, and you can look into it online, okay? The Tichborne case was an extraordinarily famous legal case at the time, and it was around 1860 to 1880 or so, just rough estimate. And that was when a woman had lost her son, and her son had been lost at sea, somewhere apparently off of the coast of Argentina or Chile or something like that. And she was desperate, and she put out a reward for him. And years went by and years went by. And then some guy in Australia said, oh, that would be me. Okay. And this was odd, because the gentleman who said it was me, in one regard, that can't be him. He's about 4 inches shorter, maybe 5. Than the Tichborne guy. But then he knew certain things that only Tichborne would have known. And they had a former employee of the family who said, yeah, that's him. And then he came back to England, and the mother said, oh, that's him. But then the brothers and sisters said, no, that's not. That is the kind of historical ambiguity that Essie Ejiowan was fascinated by. And she clearly brought elements of the Tichborne case into her designing and development of Titch as a character within the novel. Again, it's not an absolute replica or an attempt to fictionalize a historical figure, but it's also clearly indebted to the Tichborne case, which was about 30 years after Washington Black is set. Okay, so you can look into that. Look into the Tichborne case and consider how that is being used throughout the novel, especially in the early representations of Titch. And then as they go through Barbados and go up to Canada, and then he disappears, and then this person calling himself Titch comes back in the final chapters. Okay, and what's going on there? And consider the historical background of the Tichborne situation, and how it seems to have lended not only some plot twists, but it's loans itself to some of the themes that we see in the with ambiguity that we see throughout the novel. And then there's Tana's role. Consider Tana, and now she doesn't really make an appearance until the latter part of part 2 or early part of part 3, but she is profoundly influential on the nature of the novel, and also on Washington Black throughout. She is, in many regards, somebody who is self-effacing, but also very blunt and direct. She never, for example, ever met Titch, but she provides one of the most insightful assessments of Titch that Washington ever receives. Okay. So she is a very insightful woman, but she's also somewhat self-effacing. She's very assertive, but in many ways she takes a back seat. Okay, so she is an absolutely captivating character, but I want you to consider her kind of dual role, to be very assertive and insightful, but oftentimes very passive and, just not understanding things. Consider that about Tana, okay? And please keep in mind that she is of a background. Her father is British and her mother is Polynesian. In a lot of ways, she has things in common with Washington, But in a lot of ways, she doesn't. And so she is an outsider to her society, but she's an outsider in a very different way than Washington is. Okay, so keep that in mind with her. She's an absolutely captivating character. But consider her role throughout the novel, okay, especially in book 4. And then the issue of defining the nature of freedom. What is freedom? Consider how, and this is an issue I should mention that Essie Edgewan really spoke about at length in the video, with understanding what it is and how it starts with a fairly naive notion of freedom that he was told about by Big Kit. But as he goes through life, he starts revisiting that and thinking it through in the basic nature of freedom. Kit really presents him with, a certainly perfectly reasonable and well thought out notion of freedom, which is that you can just not do what other people tell you to do. Okay, and that's freedom. And that's a good definition, especially for somebody who had been taken from her country and enslaved and put to work in Barbados. Her freedom would have been the ability to say no, and that stuck with Washington. But by the time he gets to Virginia, where he does have that naive notion about what freedom is, at least how he would experience it, okay? And I want to be clear that Kit's notion of it is perfectly reasonable for somebody, again, who had been taken from her country and enslaved. That would be freedom to her. And that's the notion that he brings with him when he gets to Virginia, but he starts to rethink it as he goes through early experiences in Virginia, and he gets confronted by what's going on there, by what's going on with slavery and what's going on with the racism and everything else. And then when he gets up to Canada and into the Arctic, he actually experiences very real freedom when he loses Titch. He has nobody to protect him and nobody to tell him anything. And he's got a little bit of money. He's got absolute freedom in one sense, but he's absolutely vulnerable in another. And then that notion of freedom starts to evolve. He starts to develop some obligations and some abilities, obligations to work, to take care of others, to think of others, but also he gets the freedom to spend his own money, buy his own food, do his own things. He gets to go to England, okay? And that comes from his understanding of obligations, but also his freedom. And how is that definition of freedom, how does it evolve as he develops throughout the novel, okay? And then the last one is on art and the novel itself. And art, in many ways in the novel, is represented as the ability of drawing in almost a scientific manner to represent things. And this is an issue I have discussed in the videos, where you have Black taking on the ability to draw things and to replicate them in a fairly stunning and impressive manner. And he develops a skill, but he also has a talent. And he loses it for a while when he starts working, but he starts to develop it again. But notice the way he starts to replicate things, but also the way narrative itself, spoken language, written language, actually works in similar ways to artistic representations. And it becomes very problematic throughout the book because, again, Washington is the narrator of the novel, but he also repeatedly points out that he is borderline illiterate. He has very rough reading skills. And he demonstrates almost no writing skills, but he is your narrator, okay? He is also a gifted artist, and he gets into the complicated nature of replication when you render something or portray it, how it relates to the thing itself. And keep in mind that he compared the man who dies at the start, the elder Mr. Wilde, who originally had enslaved him and others. He talks about how he's a specimen, how he's just an image of what he used to be, okay? But then keep in mind that Washington was involved in the process of collecting specimens, representations of the living animals, representations of them, as if the specimen itself is a form of art for the living animal, okay, for the living person. And so art somehow does something similar to that, but so does narrative. The way the narrative of Mr. Wilde's death, that would be Titch's dad, okay, preceded his actual death, the way that anticipated it. Okay, and keep that in mind if you want to do the fifth one, but choose one of these topics that you want to look into. Start looking into it, and then know that there will be in week 16, if I go back to this one, so pick one of these that you like. This is again posted in the announcements for the class. And if we go back into the class itself, here it is. And there's Essie Edgewan. If we ask her to take us, please take us to week 16. This is what you'll see. I do have the videos still available if you need to see those. Those go over many of the themes that are in the essay. This is going to be, and now mind you, I have not opened this just yet. I will open it on Thursday morning, okay? But I've got it available from a teacher perspective. And what you'll see in here are 5 different topics to write on. Okay, 5 different topics to write on. You just need to answer one of them, and then you're done. Go off and have a cup of coffee and relax for a bit because you're done. You're done, you're done, you're done. Okay, just do one of the topics and that's it. This will actually, when I've got this finalized, it will say 40 points. Ignore that, okay? This essay is worth 200 points. But ignore the fact that it will say 40 up here. Please ignore that, okay? In order to make one spot in the grade sheet and to have it add up to 200 points, I had to give each question 40 points. But keep in mind, you only need to answer one of them. Then I will enter the grade as anywhere from 1 to 200, okay? So ignore the points available. And just know that this essay will be worth 200 points, okay? I will grade it. I will do it personally. This will not be automatically graded the way other quizzes have been graded. I will be grading each of the essays. And what I want to see is that you show a knowledge of the events, but also of the themes in the novel, okay? And you'll have the question here, and what you'll want to do is write your thesis at the very top of your essay, and that will answer this question that comes first, no matter which question you answer, okay? Write your thesis first. You don't need to write a whole introduction. Then write 3 to 4 body paragraphs, 3 to 4 body paragraphs that deal with particular scenes from throughout the novel, okay, and show what you want to demonstrate about that aspect, okay? This topic, which isn't finalized, this is on Titch's role in Washington Black, and I'll have all these finalized too, okay? But this is the Titch one, and if you choose that one, you would write your thesis first and then deal with 3 to 4 scenes from the novel. Describe the scene and then give your assessment. That will be 1 paragraph. You should have 3 to 4 to 5 sentences describing it, and then shift gears into 3 to 4 to 5 sentences analyzing why you find that important, okay? So that's all I've got for you guys. That will be, again, posted Thursday morning, and I wish you good luck with that. You do not need to do a works cited. You don't need to write a full introduction. You just need to write the thesis, and then write 3 to 4 good full body paragraphs that show you have a good handle on the novel. And that will be, and then rewrite the thesis at the end. That'll be your conclusion, okay? And good luck with this, guys, okay? I'll be available throughout the week to answer any questions. Take care.